And we're back with George and Paul and Generosity Jam. And Paul, I'm going to ask you if you'd talk a little bit about your origin story with your family and your history.
Yeah, glad to. George alluded to this earlier, but the Great Depression. So my family were a family of the Great Depression and post-World War II and post-World War I and the Great Depression. And they both migrated from Alabama in one case and Mississippi in another, having left their homes, their belongings, their everything, and moved to Nashville and moved over to East Nashville, where they met and where my family began. I highlight the Depression because in that era, everybody depended upon everybody. Everybody's lives were deeply impaired and their abilities to make a living and feed themselves. And so we all depended in that era and got used to it. And it was an interesting culture to be born into. I didn't think about it at the time. I just thought that must be the way it's always been. So that was the attitude of America at that time. We were all coming out of that together. We were all in it together. My mom and dad were both people that really believed in community and help and generosity. My mother was nicknamed by my friends Mother of the World.
Wow.
and my dad was the same thing. And my father taught at Vanderbilt and ran the economic development program, which was a program that brought foreigners from all corners of the world to the United States to get into the university system, learn English, get a degree in economics, get a master's and a PhD if they could raise the money and stay, and go back to their countries and bring a good economy and prosperity to these nations. So in that milieu, I grew up, and we had students from all over the world in our house. We were the only Americans that they knew. So mom and dad, really became their moms and dads in America, and it was very much a family feeling thing. So we got to exchange aid and prosperity with each other, and the gifts flowed backward and forward. One of the first car I ever got was a 1964 Volkswagen given to me by Guhn Sahota, who was an Egyptian student of my father's at Vanderbilt, who later stayed and became part of the department at Vanderbilt. So he and his family became part of our family. So that was the way it flowed. I never knew anything different than that.
So it was more a way of life than a random act that you have to, think about or promote. It was just the way your family rolled. Yeah,
and most families that I knew. So, because it was all these foreigners, that people of all different castes and colors and languages, my situation was unique. Certainly here in the Deep South.
Right.
Growing up in that and watching my parents practice that in their lives, my father was a big advocate of the sobriety of AA and gave a lot of his life to helping people out with substance abuse and issues like that all of his life. And again, mother was mother of the world. She took care of all of us. And she would carry meals to people. She had friends, older friends that needed aid. She just never stopped. So, and the thing is, what I learned is that exchange goes two ways. I saw how happy my mother was.
There you go.
And I saw how happy my father was. They greeted the world with a smile and a grin. I think if you can greet the world every day with a goofy grin, there's just something about that, and everybody you meet wants to tell their story. Everybody you meet wants to be heard. And everybody that you meet that has need they want you to understand. And then once you do, of course, you want to do something about it. Somebody once told me that we're all in the import-export business. And I said, what? What do you mean? He said, well, what you export out of your life is quite often what is likely to show up on your loading dock in your life, and vice versa.
Good metaphor.
So it was a metaphor that this exchange of giving energy brings great joy and who knows what, but it's all positivity. So
Do you
I think everybody who's lived through the Depression was impacted by it.
True.
Even if they didn't suffer greatly financially, but most did suffer significantly, but certainly they'd have to be completely oblivious to not see what was going on around them. My parents both grew up obviously impacted by it, but my mother's side of the family was Ashkenazi Orthodox Jew, and her parents arrived around 1914 from what then was Western Russia and today would be Eastern Poland, and she grew up in a neighborhood where everybody spoke Yiddish. But she had the drive and wanted to learn, and she had teachers who encouraged her. And my father, his dad died when my dad was 10 years old, but he did have some, his side of the family there had money from a wholesale grocery company, but still he lived essentially where his mother had inherited just enough money to get him through school and even through medical school. But I remember very well when I was born in 1945, and my dad, when he was a resident at Montefiore Hospital in New York, there were lots of foreign nurses, medical school students, residents who were from all over, but particularly Europe at that time. But still, they got a start. And many of them got medical training in the U.S. and went back home to make a difference where they came from. Some stayed in the U.S. But I remember that helping others to get through life and the challenges, charity, generosity, often enough it didn't have to be money, it was just advice, help, whatever. It was very much a part of their lives. I think perhaps even more so than is common today. But you have to figure they grew up in a whole different world. Money was something nobody took for granted.
Right.
And also good health. There was no antibiotics prior to World War II. Actually, not until after the war was penicillin available to the public.
Right.
So good health, money, and helping each other to get through a very, very different era than today. And that still is something that I carry with me from what my parents' example. And each family is different, but you were in a unique situation with a college professor with lots of foreign students, and that kind of input that you had is really very rare.
Truly, it was, and we could another time and place we could talk about food.
Well, I was just going to say about food,
But I was eating things wrapped in grape leaves. It's like whatever.
Right.
It was, but the exchange of goodness and the acknowledgement of pain and suffering and all those things matter every day. The dad's program was funded by AID.
Okay.
U.S. So that was the beginning of AID, was reaching out with the tool of education to third world nations. AID then branched out into healthcare and into other things that they funded. And yes, you're quite right. That has been stopped recently. So
it used to be a lot of the nurses and residents also, aside from Europe, there were a lot from the Philippines.
yes.
And because many of those already could speak English, Spanish, and their native languages, of which the Philippines has hundreds. But nobody educated in the Philippines speaks only one native language.
Yeah.
So, and it was also a Spanish colony until we, as the U.S., took the Spanish-American War and took away the Philippines from Spanish control. But those people were given opportunities to come and work in the USA, work and train. And that's a program we're not seeing so much now.
No.
But
Well, we were reaching
vividly
out.
how many of the nurses and residents training to go out back to their own home countries as nurses and doctors. That was a very significant portion of the people that my father was interacting with at Montefiore Hospital when he was a resident there.
Yeah.
And even later,
So you had,
when he
you
was
saw
a lab
firsthand.
director and pathologist in Pittsburgh, and later yet in Chicago, a goodly number of the people that worked with him and trained were from a wide variety of places: Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, and
Yep.
much less of that now. This country
It
is
doesn't
not
exist.
as welcoming now on that.
No, it doesn't exist. It was viewed by our government at the time and by the rest of the world as the best foreign policy that we did, because it was attraction. And with whatever other tools that we had to use from time to time and relative to foreign policy, it was always balanced and leavened by the love of sharing our wealth as a nation. And we should go back to it for sure.
So our domestic policy back then, because we were a less populated country,
Yes.
Less populated world, but our domestic policy was more about a domestic way of life and sharing and kindness and generosity, because we valued peace so highly. After that, we valued, I can remember when I was growing up, which my parents went through the Depression, and I was born in 1950. Me
too.
Yeah, both of us were born in 1950, and there was never any licking the bowl of the cake mix because you didn't waste it. You cleaned it all and you put it in the cake. You wiped out the tuna can, and then, there just wasn't any waste. And giving food and sharing food was an act of generosity.
True.
So we'll be back with Paul and George in just a minute, so stay tuned for the next segment of Generosity Jam.